It's the 24th of January 2025. Let's take a look at the headlines making waves in Nigeria today. We'll start with the Punch newspaper. The bolder headlines: subscribers meet NCC today as Labour mobilizes for showdown. You can turn to page 19 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. And beside the nameplates, refineries revamp, marketers eye rehabilitation of NNPCL 21 depots. You can turn to page 20 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. And above the nameplates at the top left, opposition cautions against diversion of 4 billion naira household bailout. You can turn to page 2 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. Police post 10,000 constables, planned 30,000 annual recruitment. You can turn to page 10 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. And beside that, forced retirement. Falana urges Tinubu to reinstate 20 generals, 18 others. You can turn to page 12 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. And underneath the picture, Tinubu opens Abuja barracks, promises better soldiers' welfare. You can turn to page 30 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. And beside that at the left, OAU student murder. A court affirms Osun hotelier's death sentence. You can turn to page 10 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. Beside that, how we rescued ex-AIG's wife, killed abductors, police. You can turn to page 4 and 5 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. And beside that, Oyebanji kicks against Sharia court in Ekiti, warns opposition. You can turn to page 12 of the Punch newspaper to get the complete story. Moving on to the Guardian newspaper, the border headlines: how Nigeria can leverage tertiary institutions' untapped talents. You can turn to pages 4 and 5 of the Guardian newspaper to get the complete story. And underneath the picture, Juntala led Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger to unveil common passport. You can turn to page 7 of the Guardian newspaper to get the complete story. And underneath that, inflation: 30 million more Nigerians at risk of falling below poverty line in 2025, says report. You can turn to page 6 of the Guardian newspaper to get the complete story. And beside that, Trump's tariffs new trade barriers unsettle world leaders' agencies. You can turn to page 6 of the Guardian newspaper to get the complete story. Ondo government diffuses tension as cows allegedly destroy 265 million naira crops. You can turn to page 28 of the Guardian newspaper to get the complete story. And underneath that, over 20 killed as bandits Boko Haram faction clash. You can turn to page 30 of the Guardian newspaper to get the complete story. Inflation, debt burden may hinder Nigeria's economy recovery, LCCI warns. You can turn to page 7 of the Guardian newspaper to get the complete story. And beside that, FG disburses 116.18 billion naira student loans, approves 4 billion naira for vulnerable households. You can turn to page 3 of the Guardian newspaper to get the complete story. And at the bottom, fuel tanker explosion: why FG should mandate life insurance for victims. You can turn to Metro page 8 to get the complete story. Now to the Daily Trust. The border headlines: how Nigerian can solve food insecurity. You can turn to page 1 of the Daily Trust to get the complete story. And above that, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger to launch common passport. You can turn to page 32 of the Daily Trust to get the complete story. Court proscribes Lakurawa sect, declares it a terrorist organization. You can turn to page 14 of the Daily Trust to get the complete story. And beside that, former FCT Minister Jeremiah Usani dies at 81. You can turn to page 34 of the Daily Trust newspaper to get the complete story. And beside the picture, FG spends 9 billion naira on Shiroro Mando Kaduna power line. You can turn to page 23 of the Daily Trust to get the complete story. Transcorp Power records 305.9 billion naira revenue in 2024. You can turn to page 24 of the Daily Trust to get the complete story. And underneath the picture, NSCIA explains support for Quran Festival. Tinubu orders to attend event. You can turn to page 11 of the Daily Trust newspaper to get the complete story. Now to the Nigerian Tribune. Bolder headlines: Japa, only 6,000 medical consultants remain in Nigeria. You can turn to page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. And above the nameplate, Interior Minister orders deployment of passport printers in Atlanta, New York consulate. You can turn to page 18 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. And beside that, Ekiti government denies existence of Sharia court. You can turn to page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. And beside that, Alafin, kingmakers, priests will decide when to start rites. Professor Abim Bola. You can turn to page 28 of the Nigerian Tribune to get a complete story. And beside the picture, Timothy Adegoke, appeal court affirms Adedoyin's death sentence. You can turn to page 5 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. Transcorp Power posts 115 pre-tax profits to pay full dividend of 37.5 billion naira. You can turn to page 7 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. And underneath that, 77% of Nigerian women use skin lightening products, FG. You can turn to page 5 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. How police rescued ex-AIG's wife from abductors. You can turn to page 4 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. And underneath the picture, FG directs WAEC NECO orders to inscribe NIN date of birth photograph on certificates. You can turn to page 3 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. And beside that, alleged 2.8 billion naira fraud. Ex-aviation minister Sirika approved contract for son-in-law's firms. You can turn to page 12 of the Nigerian Tribune to get the complete story. Now to the Vanguard. The border headlines: inflation fall, economy to grow by 4.1% this year, CBN. You can turn to page 2 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. And above the nameplate, judge temporarily blocks Trump's order to end birthright citizenship. You can turn to page 3 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. Military's welfare our priority, Tinubu. You can turn to page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. Telecom's tariff will be reviewed periodically, Edu. You can turn to page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. And above that, Transcorp Power posts 150% pre-tax profit to 305.9 billion naira. You can turn to page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. And beside the picture, ex-FCT Minister General Jerry Useni dies at 82. You can turn to page 6 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. And below that, Cricket U19 Women World Cup. Nigerian girls battle England tomorrow. You can turn to page 32 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. And underneath the picture, how poor research funding stifles national development. You can turn to page 14 of the Vanguard to get the complete story. And underneath that, at the left, Adegoke murder. A court upholds Adedoyin's death sentence. You can turn to page 4 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. And beside that, minister orders deployment of passport printers in U.S. consulates. You can turn to page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. And beside that, police rescue AIG Odumosu's wife, kill 2 kidnappers. You can turn to page 4 of the Vanguard newspaper to get the complete story. And these are the headlines making waves in Nigeria today. If any of these headlines caught your attention, do well to get a copy of the paper.
Visit Housing TV Africa on YouTube and click on the subscribe button. Subscribe to Housing TV Africa to stay updated on latest happenings in Nigeria's housing sector. Follow our social media pages, like and share our posts. On Facebook, Housing TV Africa. On Twitter, Housing TV Africa. Instagram, Housing TV Africa.
Housing TV Africa, your first in housing development broadcasting.